now we have the great honor of introducing you to Sophie Greve. She is from Norway, a judge who has been extensively involved in cases dealing with genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. Thank you so much for joining us, Sophie.
Thank you for inviting me.
This is your first time in Armenia, and you arrived early this morning to take part in the commemoration ceremonies at the memorial. It's a very simple memorial. It's a few concrete slabs with the eternal flame in the center. How did you feel being here as somebody who has dedicated her life basically to trying cases of atrocities, of crimes against humanity?
I was very moved, and I like the simplicity of the monuments. I think they speak to the brutality of it all, and it causes you to reflect. I very much appreciated to participate in the ceremony, and it made an impact on me.
Yeah, I think it makes an impact. You know, you think it's very simple, yet it's very powerful. You know, we've been speaking about the Armenian Genocide from the aspect of history, from academia. We've looked at the political aspects of genocide recognition and why it isn't being recognized today by many. You know, the European Parliament very recently on April 15 passed a resolution recognizing the Armenian Genocide and calling on Turkey to come to terms with its past. Pope Francis in the Vatican, as you know, gave a holy mass where he called it the first genocide of the 20th century. Now, as somebody who has worked at the European Court of Human Rights and at The Hague, trying cases, talk to me, if you will, about the legal aspect of Armenian genocide, of its recognition and or lack of recognition.
Actually, maybe I'll go a little bit back in time. I worked for the High Commissioner for Refugees in the aftermath of the Khmer Rouge genocide against their own people, and wrote my doctoral thesis on that, and came to work a lot with victims of genocide. And then later, I was also called upon by the Security Council to look at war crimes in the former Yugoslavia, and documented genocide and crimes against humanity in Bosnia. And to do this, you need to read extensively. And you cannot understand anything in isolation. Unfortunately, crime, and I think that was a very beautiful and very moving and very timely thing to happen today, is that one draws the parallel and the line. This is an ongoing issue. And actually many of the issues that I faced when we had eventually a prosecution in The Hague for war crimes and genocide and crimes against humanity in the former Yugoslavia, we saw exactly the same pattern as we had seen previously. So I've also studied Holocaust extensively, and I think to understand and to learn, to understand the present, to provide wisely for the future, we need to acknowledge the truth, we need to know the truth, and we need to know that this outrageous crime, the most outrageous crime, genocide, follows also a kind of pattern. And actually the Armenian, the developments, the sad developments under the genocide in Armenia, they were used exactly along similar lines in later genocides, such as one recruited into special organizations, prisoners, released for the purpose. One had intellectuals and leaders rounded up, killed, deported, taken away. One had people taken out of their homes, sent to nothing. Maybe the Armenian situation with people being evacuated to the Syrian desert was extreme example of that. But I think to understand what has happened later and to be able to sense when we face danger again, because I'm afraid these kind of crimes will not end unless we are prepared to bring them to justice. It's too late for the Armenian genocide to bring it to justice, but we can learn from it, and we should learn extensively from it. And I also think that when we look at the past to understand it in depth, we face the truth, and we face something in our own cultures, in our own minds. We see what is good and what is bad. And it has been said that, well, genocide actually was defined by the brilliant lawyer Raphael Lemkin after World War II. But actually, he looked back. He said, what I had in mind was the Armenian case. And he himself came from, I think, from, at the time, Austrian Galicia. And I think the word in German, Volkmord, and in Scandinavian language, Folkemord, was used already and perhaps even before the genocide. It was not given a precise definition, but that's always what happens with crime. First comes the crime, and then we see we cannot keep society, at least we try to come to grips with it. Then we define a crime, and then we start using that word and we bring people to court. I even like to take a long look back and say, if you look at the Bible and the story of Cain killing his brother Abel, we have no difficulties in calling that murder, and we have no difficulties in calling it fratricide. Of course, they didn't speak Latin, there were no courts, but the elements of the crime were in place. And all the elements of the crime of genocide, which is very precisely defined by the International Criminal Court now, are in place for the Armenian genocide.
It's interesting. You say all the elements of the crime as defined by the UN Convention on Genocide and by the courts, international courts. If we look at the body of academia, of historians that have studied the genocide, non-Armenian academicians and researchers, if you look at all of them, everything is there. And yet, because of politics, because of strategic interests, many countries in the world or powers in the world that could impact or could assist the Armenian nation to have closure, because denial is the last stage of genocide, and now 3-4 generations on, we're still grappling with this issue. How do you address that? Do you look, from a legal perspective, do you look at the victims, the psychology of the victims, how the victims are addressed in this case once, if there has been justice? Because I think in the case of the Armenian genocide, the victim has been forgotten.
Unfortunately, that's frequently the case in criminal law. It shouldn't be the case, and I think we have seen a development, say, over the 2 or 3 last decades, in which we have come to focus more on victims. Because actually, there has been such a terrible upheaval and break of the balance that needs to be in any society. For what reason? The victim's position has to be taken into account, much more than it has been done in the past. And for the victims, there are 2 main things, I think. One being to know the truth, and the second being to have someone to say, mea culpa. It was actually wrong, and I did it. And I think the elements of the crime, when we had the Genocide Convention, we hadn't yet developed international law that fully as to develop all the elements of the crime, the description. That has come with the Rome Statute, which is from this millennium. But if someone wants to say we meet all the criteria, all the elements of the crime, we did cause death, we did deport, causing death, we did decimate, we did want to destroy in total. If that is recognized step by step, that could be an alternative, but to me there is no distinction. It's easier to say it is genocide, and there is no question.
I'm going to ask you perhaps what might sound like a difficult question. If today you were an advisor, a legal advisor to the state of Armenia, to the Republic of Armenia, who has on its agenda the international recognition of the Armenian Genocide, what should the state, the Republic of Armenia, do when it has also a diaspora who was born as a result of the Armenian Genocide? What could the diaspora and the state of the Republic of Armenia do to ensure the international recognition of the Armenian Genocide? What would you advise?
There are good reasons why I'm not a politician, I'm afraid. But I would think that truth speaks for itself and cannot be denied in the long run. Actually, I would collect still whatever is of memory of the genocide, perhaps even having a project similar to the one in Israel, where one tries to give a name, a face, an identity to every victim that's known. That's also a way of working with this. But I think the move in international community is towards recognition. And I think it's irreversible. And I hope that.
So do I. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to Armenia to take part in the commemoration alongside us, and thank you for all the work that you've done and being a vocal voice for recognition in Norway as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Judge Sophie Greve, who's been involved in many international cases. She's tried cases on genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.